So bookkeeping is basically, there's a lot of different areas of bookkeeping, but the most common, in my opinion, is just keeping your expenses and your profits organized. So that way, when it comes to the end of the year, you can see how much money you've actually made and
Mm.
then turn around and see how much money you've spent out. You can have it very broad if you'd like, or you can be very detailed as much as you'd like. So I have some people that will say, for instance, if they travel, they will put, flights, hotels, Uber, Lyft, um, coach tickets, all in travel together. And I also have some people that want to see how much they spent on Spirit, how much they spent on Delta, how much they spent on United in terms of their flight, whether breakdown of Uber and Lyft. Also, if they're looking at their cell phone, if they have more than one cell phone provider, how much they're spending with Sprint, how much they're spending with AT&T or Sprint T-Mobile, sorry, AT&T or Verizon. So you can get very detailed. Also, if it's project-based, you can also see how much revenue you've collected based on that project and how much you've spent. So, but it will give you a breakdown of your expenses, and it details it so that way when it comes to tax time, you know exactly, what is being spent. So another term would be a profit and loss statement. Looking at other assets, then we also have your balance sheet, which is all like your banking stuff, loans, your assets and liabilities. So having bookkeeping, especially for a small business, is very vital. So that way you can see where you're spending your money and also keeping a calculation of the revenue that you've also collected.
So how, again, the reason I wanted to do this, like this interview style, to educate myself as well as to put myself and represent myself in the eyes of the consumer in terms of what stops them from doing this. So for me, so first of all, I had, a personal credit card that my MailChimp would come out of and stuff. So I was mixing up personal and finance all the time. If there wasn't enough money in my personal for something, I would use the business money. So that's what was happening. And then just like you, I'm like, okay, I need to, even though I have all these skills and everything, I need to start to run my business more professionally. I started, again, a business account that only business stuff comes through. And so for this year, I'm very happy with that level of progress in terms of keeping my personal finances and my business finances separate. But I don't track anything. I have invoices that are tracked in Canada from Invoice Simple. I have invoices on PayPal. I have invoices in maybe Thrivecart. I have 2 different PayPal accounts. So when you're talking to me about bookkeeping, there's a little feeling of overwhelm because I don't even know where I would start to give it to you. Like, I don't know if you would just say, okay, Nakimbe, download Waves and that will take everything. So some people don't go to the gym. Some people don't take the first step because just like Martin Luther King, they're looking at the entire staircase. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? Not focusing on the entire elephant. You have to focus on one step at a time. So I'm just saying all of that to say the thought of bookkeeping, the thought of starting bookkeeping is overwhelming. So what is the first thing you would tell me? And how could you convince me to do it? Because even though, just like smoking and working out, even though it's something I know I should do, I keep thinking I can do it by myself, or I can do it later. I can do it at tax time, which we know never works out because you're left scrambling. So how would you convince me to do bookkeeping, given all of my internal sort of psychological barriers and resistance to even getting this friggin' thing started? Where would we start? So I just told you I have 2 PayPal accounts, Canada and US shit. Everything is everywhere. How would you help me? How could I start thinking about bookkeeping?
Okay, so a couple of things that I also will let people know, that if it ever comes down to an audit, people will say, well, I just have my bank statements. Revenue Canada and the IRS could care less about your bank statements. They want to see organization and receipts. So, or some type of record of accounting. So that will also satisfy. Now, one of the biggest reasons why people don't
So
get
I'm
into
sorry,
bookkeeping.
just so I'm clear, because people
Yes.
sometimes run on fear. So you're telling me if I don't do my bookkeeping, it could be a huge IRS or Canada Revenue Agency problem down the line, because that would be motivating to get to bookkeep. Because I think a lot of
Yes.
entrepreneurs
So
are too
I'll give you an
lazy to do it.
example. Let me give you a prime example. Let's say somebody starts their business for the first time, right? And they say, well, I really didn't make any money, but I spent a whole lot of money in expenses, right? So if you don't show revenue of some sort, even if it's $1, and you have $10,000-15,000 in expenses, that's a huge red flag right there. And then that is also potential for you to get audited, or in Canada, as we say, reassessed, where they're going to go back and they're going to look, they're going to say, well, you only made, you didn't put that you made any money, but you had $10,000 to $15,000. Now, is it sometimes common for some people to not make any revenue during starting up a business, but they're spending so much money trying to get their business up and running? Yeah, it can happen. But I always tell people, put something down. Even if you paid yourself 50, you put in $50 into the business, right? $50, $100, $500, and then you have your write-offs. Put something in there, because if not, then it could be an issue down the line. Yes, it becomes very overwhelming because there's so many ins and outs. For me personally, I do it in parts. I know that tax talk, bookkeeping, accounting can be very overwhelming for a lot of people. So what I'll do is I'll take it down in parts and say, okay, let's accomplish this first task. Let's do this first. And once we do this, then we will go to this. Okay. So that way everything is kind of broken down and it's not thrown at you all at once. So one of the reasons why people are kind of afraid or don't really want, one, it's knowledge. Number one, it's just basic knowledge, also just guidance, but it's also cost. So I'll give you an example. QuickBooks has a monthly cost, but it also has like QuickBooks for self-employed, QuickBooks for, it also has QuickBooks for small businesses. They have ones for like enterprises, and it has, based on what you need, you can kind of go up. The only thing is with QuickBooks, if you start off with QuickBooks for self-employed and then you need to go to QuickBooks for small business, you can't upgrade the account. You basically have to cancel that account and start a new one. So that can be, there are pros and cons to a lot of the online platforms. Also, something else that you can look into, and if you're thinking about cost, I will sometimes recommend Waves. Waves is a really good tool to start learning, instead of just kind of being thrown to the world of bookkeeping and you don't know what you're doing. So I'll say, okay, well, if your revenue's this, or you're not having a lot of transactions, let's start with Waves and let's play with that. And so that way you get familiar with what you're trying to do. And then once you outgrow that, then we'll go to another platform. Waves is completely free. You can do invoicing from there. But if you create an invoice or you collect any type of revenue, they do charge a merchant service fee. That's how they get paid. But it also is a good tool to learn. You can also attach your bank accounts to it. So bank accounts, credit cards, you can attach to that. In terms of like PayPal, that I'm not sure. But I know with Waves, you can also separate your accounts where you can have a US account and you can have a Canadian account. Same thing with QuickBooks or Xero. You can have a US account and you can have a Canadian account.
So this is just software that you buy, you download it, or it's an app? Like, how does it connect to everything? So now I kind of understand the depth of bookkeeping. Before bookkeeping, it even sounds simple, right? Oh, I'm going to keep your books. I'm going to track your expenses. Ooh, I can do that myself, right? So now I have a deeper understanding of the intricacies that are involved, as well as the potential legalities of it. So, and now you've also sort of alleviated this one fear or concern around cost, because you're saying Waves is free. So like we know with all businesses, when they're growing, they want to do the free stuff first, but once they start making some money, they want to upgrade. So let's say I'm getting a decent handle on Waves and I don't want to do this anymore. What is a realistic budget? What is the range for bookkeeping? Because some people may not even know how much it actually really
It's
costs.
going to vary. It's definitely going to vary on your need.
Okay, so how much, what's the minimum? So two questions. One, the difference between paying a bookkeeper as opposed to just getting QuickBooks. My understanding from what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong. So my understanding is with one, if you need to upgrade or if it gets more complicated, you're basically starting from scratch. Whereas if you work with an actual person, they can just kind
Well,
of
I
grow
mean,
with your business.
it's just the type of account. I'm just going to use QuickBooks as an example. It's just the type of account that you have. So some accounts don't allow you to do payroll. Let's say I'm in a basic one and I don't have payroll, right?
Mhm.
And then eventually I want to add on payroll. So let's say I do, like, I'll give you an example. I had a client that had QuickBooks for self-employed, but now she wants to do payroll. She couldn't just upgrade her account. They made her basically cancel that one account and then create a new account with QuickBooks that has payroll integrated in with
What's
it.
the problem with that? Do you lose data? Why is that a
Yes, you
problem?
do. Yes, you do. Yes, you the data from the old account you do lose.
Okay.
So one of the things is, like I partner with ADP. I also use QuickBooks. I also do have like a kind of like a Waves account. But I tell people, like, say for instance, if somebody gets into QuickBooks for payroll and you only pay for what you use, but if you cancel your account, you lose your payroll too. So you lose all your stuff that you've categorized and you lose your payroll. So that's not necessarily, so for me, my payroll is separate. So I use ADP for my payroll.
Okay.
And some people can use Gusto or Paychecks or whatever any of these accounts are.
So in your opinion, is it better to have a person bookkeeper or software, or in what circumstances would you
So
use each
you
other?
can allow your accountant to have access to your books, to your accounting software.
Okay.
Sometimes with some of my clients, I have access to the accounting software so I can go in and pull the reports that I need for tax time. But if I have to go in and start categorizing and start putting things together and doing payroll and doing, issuing out payments for contractors, that type of thing, then I do charge for that. So I do
Okay.
charge a monthly fee to keep up and make sure that everything is organized. A lot of times clients will keep their own and then they'll give me the reports that I need.
So what's the minimum someone could or would invest in software or
So I think
professional
with
bookkeeping?
QuickBooks for self-employed, I think is $15 a month, somewhere around there.
Okay.
I think QuickBooks for a small business may start at like 50, somewhere around
Okay.
there.
So I gave you my circumstance. Let's say I'm like, okay, Tanya, I think I want to do this bookkeeping thing. What's the first thing that you tell me that I have to do? Because I'm
So
already
we
overwhelmed, just because, like I said, the
right.
two PayPal accounts, the blah, blah, blah. What's our
So
first step?
the first thing we will do is we will link all of your accounts to your accounting software. So whether I know QuickBooks lets you do PayPal, so we could do PayPal. I don't know if on the Canadian side, if all of them will integrate. I know on the US side, they do integrate with a lot of platforms. So we'll see what we can get integrated into that software. So everything pulls in. And
And
then once we do that, then I'll show you how to go in and start categorizing your expenses or your income.
right.
And I'll also show you how to create accounts and sub accounts or expenses and
Wow.
sub expenses. So that way you know what goes into what.
Now, how long is that? An hour long meeting? Is that a 2 hour meeting? Like, I just get overwhelmed thinking about
About
that.
an
I have to
hour and a
look at.
half. Just, we would do a Zoom like this and kind of go in and I'll show you, hey, this is how you categorize this. If you're looking for a particular report, this is where you can go in to look at your reports.
So
So
you do like this,
I'll kind of walk you through the basics.
like a one-on-one hand holding thing.
Yes.
Okay, so if I want to get cheap bookkeeping software, it's like $15 to $50. And if I wanted to hire you, because when we send out the email, we're not trying to send people to QuickBooks. So what's your minimum cost, and would I meet with you once a month? How does it work? How does bookkeeping with a
So the minimum
professional person work?
cost.
Oh, one question. So